Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority. I'm joined by my colleagues Beth Holbrook and Jeff Acerson, and today is Wednesday, December the 9th. Just as a note that if you'd like to join our meeting live, you can do so through our WebEx portal, and we would invite comment through that means. If you certainly can submit comments electronically online. We are live streaming our meeting today, and in order to do so, I'll ask Jenna Osler if she'll read a statement that allows us to do that.
Thank you, Chair. This is the electronic board meeting determination statement. Consistent with provisions of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act, specifically Utah Code 52-4-207, subsection 4, and acting in my capacity as the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Utah Transit Authority, I hereby make the following determinations in support of my decision to hold and convene electronic meetings of the UTA Board without a physical anchor location. 1, conducting board and board committee meetings with an anchor location that is physically accessible for members of the public to attend in person presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. 2, this determination is based upon the following facts, among others. The COVID-19 pandemic is ongoing and significant, and continued community person-to-person virus transmission continues to occur in the state of Utah, and federal, state, and local health authorities have adopted guidelines for the general public and businesses which encourage institutions and individuals to take precautions, including limiting in-person interactions and recommending increased virtual interactions. This written determination takes effect on November 11th, 2020, and is effective until midnight on December 11th, 2020, and may be reissued by future written determinations of the chair of the board at that or any other appropriate time. Dated the 6th day of November 2020, Carlton J. Christensen.
Thanks, Jenna. With that, we will commence with our meetings, and our first item up is our Safety First Minute, and with that, we welcome Sheldon Shaw. Good morning, Sheldon.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, trustees. Appreciate the opportunity as always. Today I chose mental health as the safety message. And all of us are under a lot of stress, both personal and professional, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if we add to that the stress of the holiday season, it's a concern for all of us and lead to increased risk of anxiety and depression. Unfortunately, that oftentimes leads to use of substances, perhaps relapses or even overdoses. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to keep an eye on our friends and our relatives and our coworkers. Fortunately, here at UTA, we have a resource through our employee systems program. We partner with Blomquist Hale, and they offer face-to-face therapy, rapid crisis intervention. They also have workshops and training available to us as UT employees. So help watch out for each other. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sheldon. It is a great reminder that we seek help and that everyone is important. And anyway, great message. Jenna, have we had anybody register through our WebEx portal that wants to make comment?
I do not see any at this time, Chair.
Okay. Just as a note, if you, in the future, meetings, if you would like to make a live comment, you're welcome to register through the WebEx link, and each individual is allowed 3 minutes. With no public comment, we'll move forward with our consent agenda, which is approval of our minutes from December the 2nd. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to...
Why don't we go with Beth? Oh, okay, Beth, why don't you go?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as outlined.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion by Beth, seconded by Jeff, to approve. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. For the agency report, our executive director is tied up with another event right now, and although she made a note to me that she didn't actually have anything to report on at this point, but she may later in the meeting, and we'll certainly acknowledge her when she's able to join us. So we'll move forward then to our financial report and for October of 2020, and with that, we'll welcome Brad Armstrong. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Brad Armstrong. I'm the senior manager of budget and financial analysis here at UTA. I wanted to comment today about the UTA Board dashboard, which focuses on key financial metrics and other metrics for UTA for the month of October, with commentary about the sales tax revenues for UTA, which are through September of 2020. So to start off with, let's talk about sales tax. Our sales tax revenues for the month of September were about 15, almost 16% over our budget for the year, which is pretty amazing. And one of the things that I back off and remind you of is that Utah has had a very resilient economy in the face of the pandemic. In fact, what's been happening is Utah's been a bit of a magnet for people who want to come here from elsewhere. And as a result of that, and a diversified economy and other factors, our economy hasn't been hit nearly as hard as other places. And what's happened is we've also received stimulus from the government in terms of direct payments and also very low interest rates, which have really buoyed our economy. So for the year, if you look on the right side, you can see we're up about 2.7% over budget. For sales tax, almost $7 million. If you look at the graph down below, you can see what's happening as well. You can see that blue line, which is the 12-month moving average for sales tax growth, which is about 8% year-over-year growth versus our long-term average, and the green line, which is about 5%. So good news there. We still don't know quite what the long-term impact of the COVID event is going to have on us, but the news is that we at least have the sales tax revenue. On the other side of that, we have fare box revenues. If you look on the right side, we're down about 38% in terms of fare box revenues, because if you look a little bit further down our ridership line, our ridership is down about 45%. Those two, of course, are tied together. There's a little bit of a difference just because we do receive payments from entities based on a monthly basis rather than the number of riders. So as Monica Morden mentioned in other meetings, we are renegotiating some of those agreements, which will lessen the fixed nature of those payments. Moving down the board, I did want to comment about diesel prices. As you can see in October, our diesel prices, which we buy over about 6 million gallons of diesel a year to run our vehicles, we paid $1.45 in the month of October. That rate has actually gone up to $1.85 in the month of November. So there's some increases in fuel prices as world oil prices go up and the economies start to revive around the world. Do you have any questions on this slide? If not, let's go to the next slide. And this illustrates that passenger revenue issue I mentioned before. This is a cumulative view of passenger revenues. The blue bar is where we thought we would be. So through October on the far right, we thought we'd have about $46 million in passenger revenue. The green bar is actually how much we've received, about $29 million. The difference is about $17 million less than we thought we would receive. Next chart. Going back to sales tax, this is a 12-month moving, showing where we were for the last 12 months versus the prior 12 months by county that contribute to UTA through our service area. And you can see on the left side that Salt Lake City has had a growth, Salt Lake County, excuse me, has grown by about 4.3%. But if you look at the outlying counties, Utah County, Davis County, and Weber County, which make up most of the rest of our area in terms of sales tax contributions, they're growing at well over double-digit rates. And that's being driven a lot by construction and also by new move-ins. Interesting note, is the Kim Gardner Institute at the University of Utah just released a report talking about demographic growth, or growth of number of people in various categories. And what's happened is Utah County has had greater growth in terms of population over the last year or so than Salt Lake County. That's one of the first times that's ever happened. And a big portion of that has been in migration from other states and countries. And very interesting. So it's not just births, which one might expect, but it's actually more people moving in than births. So that's one of the key drivers of our economy.
Brad, can I ask one question on that? Obviously, people are not commuting, in a normal customary pattern. Does that, and often they are commuting into Salt Lake County. Does that have some bearing? You don't have jazz games, you don't have a lot of the events that you would normally have. Does that have some bearing in the sort of tepid growth in Salt Lake County numbers?
I would think so. I would think that the people in outlying counties probably were coming in and spending their money in Salt Lake County, and now they're probably staying and spending it in their own counties.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious if you had any sense.
Yeah, and I think we see that in terms of restaurant sales and such, in the core of Salt Lake, where people are not occupying those office buildings right now. So next slide, please. And this is another cut of it. If you look on the far right, if you look at this is budget in the blue, actual in the green, and you can see we're sort of holding steady for the year. And then this last September, we had a pretty good bump. Now, one of the things, also one of the things that we've done is when we dig into the numbers, we're seeing some dramatic increases in internet sales, which, as you can imagine, is going very strong now as people refrain from going out and about and purchasing things, and they're buying things from home. We're seeing a real spike in terms of the growth of that area of retail sales growth. Next slide. And one of the things we did want to mention is that CARES funding estimate. So one of the things that we did receive through congressional action is the CARES Act funding. And the green bar is how much we've been able to receive so far, about $75 million in CARES Act funding. And that's helped offset that farebox loss of about $17 million that we discussed before. Next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to cover some variances with regard to how much we thought we were going to spend and how much we're actually spending in terms of our operating expenses. So through October 31st, we've spent about $26 million less than budgeted for the year. And much of that has been due to us reducing our services to match the demand for those services. But we have increased our services from a low up to about 90% of our prior levels. In the administrative area, for instance, what we've done is we've reduced our consumption of, for instance, we've had Microtransit that we've provided. We've had less demand for it, so we've spent about $1 million less than we expected for that service. We've also had IT expenditures of $1.5 million less because of either delays in projects or projects we won't be spending money on. We also have not needed to spend as much. We haven't had as many unexpected expenditures to go into our contingency expenses. On the operation support side, you can see we have about $2.6 million less spending than we expected. The big part of that has to do with training of our operators. As we've had less service, then the need for us to hire new operators and train them has declined. On the paratransit side, we've had less use. It's about $2.5 million down. A big part of that has been less use of our outsourced paratransit services. Let's see. And then moving on down, we have our maintenance away area. It's down about $700,000. A big portion of that is the electricity we need to run tracks. As we run a little bit less track service, then we save money on electricity. On the light rail side, a big portion of that $2.75 million reduction in cost is associated with our labor. We've had to use less labor to run that service. And we've also, because we're running our vehicles less, we haven't had to spend as much on repair parts. And so that's about $1 million there. On our commuter rail side, we've run a little bit less service, and as a result, we've saved about $3 million in fuel. And that fuel saving has come from two things. It's come from a reduced price for fuel and a reduced number of gallons that are used in our commuter rail product. And finally, on bus, similar story. We're using almost $5 million less in fuel. That's contributed to that $6 million in savings. We've also spent less on parts. And the next slide illustrates some of those things that we mentioned. Lower costs for wages and benefits, less use of services, and the big one, almost $9 million savings in fuel. And then the last slide just illustrates that by executive area where our reductions in savings is, and as you would expect, the big savings are in our operating area. Do you have any questions for me today on these issues?
Yeah.
Brad, I just wanted to state that although there was a reduction in the need for operators, that we didn't actually lay off operators in any way. It was just the reduction of the need for new. And so just wanted to point that out. Otherwise, thank you. This is really enlightening as always. So.
Yes, I agree. What we've done is one of the tricks we've had during prior to this pandemic time is getting good operators and keeping good operators. And we do not want to lose that great talent that we already have in place.
Any other questions for Brad? Brad, thank you for your presentation and for the analysis. And you know, one day I hope we can spend this money in the sense that we have service and things coming back a little more to normal. But I think it certainly has helped us weather this storm well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, with that, we'll move to our first item up on our resolutions. And the first item up is a resolution giving notice and setting regular meeting dates for the authority's Board of Trustees, as well as our audit committee for the year 2021. Just as a general time frame, we've kind of focused in for the most part on having meetings on the second and the fourth Wednesday, and then occasionally there is a third meeting in the month that we'll also have, but that'll help a little bit in our staff planning on when to have things ready and help in the rhythm of meeting preparation. I think with that, well, here's an example, I guess, of the dates outlined in the resolution, as well as other aspects, including the local advisory council who set their own dates. So, with that, I would entertain a motion on the resolution.
Mr. Chair, I make the motion to approve R 2020-12-06, resolution giving notice and setting regular meeting dates for the authority's Board of Trustees and Audit Committee for calendar year 2021.
Second.
I have a motion from Jeff, seconded by Beth. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Acerson,
Yay or yay?
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye or yay?
Chair Christensen.
I'll just go with yes.
Great, the vote is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Love variety. So with that, we'll go on to the next resolution, which is authorizing the purchase of real property for Box Elder County right-of-way with Dutch A, LLC. With that, we'll welcome Paul Drake, our Director of Real Estate. Paul, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, trustees. As you're aware, Box Elder County has set aside some funds from their second quarter sales tax for future transit service. UTA has been using those funds to preserve corridor right-of-way. And negotiations have concluded on a particular piece of property in Willard that is needed for future corridor. and provides opportunity for transit service, in particularly a transit station. I've got Spencer Burgoyne and Hal Johnson, who are on the project team. They're also available to answer questions if needed. The seller of the property is Dutch A LLC. As I mentioned, this property is going to be used for right-of-way for the Box Elder, for Box Elder County. It's located at 550 West, 750 North in Willard. It's roughly 37.5 acres. And the seller has agreed to the appraised price of $2,489,000, or roughly $66,400 per acre, which is included in the project budget. Next slide, please. This is the map of the property for context. The property is located just off of the freeway interchange at 750 North in Willard and consists of 2 large parcels, as you can see here. The parcel against 750 North is zoned commercial, and the larger parcel to the south is zoned agricultural. Purchasing the property now meets Box Elder County's expectations of UTA to preserve a corridor for future transit. It also allows us to set aside that corridor at this time to avoid future acquisition costs, which may go up, as well as potential relocation costs in the future. Next slide, please. Because of the value of the transaction, UTA policy requires that it be approved by resolution. So the staff recommends that and requests that the board approve the resolution to purchase the property and authorize the executive director to execute the contract and those related documents. Do you have any questions for us?
I don't have a question, Paul, but thank you very much for your presentation. I had a comment. I know that Box Elder is really investing in the future in this, and as you can see by the land costs alone, it is even all of our growth in the state of Utah is impacting every location. So I think it's great for us to be able to set aside this right of way now so that we don't incur future costs, which would be possibly even greater because this land is not yet developed. So I think that this is a great opportunity, and I concur with your statement. Box Elder is definitely excited to continue to proceed in this fashion.
Well, I did have a question. I don't know whether it's you or Hal. You mentioned something about station. Have the actual station locations been identified, and was that part of an earlier process?
Yeah, Hal, would you like to give a little more context?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So there was a previous engineering study that we had done and a planning study that kind of identified station locations. And we had noted one in this location kind of around the Flying J, and then a second, another stop up in Brigham City, which we also own some property up there. And then we also have purchased a site south of 91, the road that goes up to Logan, for a third station site. So we've got 3 station areas preserved right now. We would, as we do move into project development in the future, we would do an environmental document that would kind of determine final station locations. So this is largely a right-of-way preservation effort, but the locations are based on previous planning and engineering studies that we had done.
The other question I had for you, Paul, is the current use an agricultural use? I was trying to decide if that was a golf course or what's the nature of it, and how does it get maintained in the meantime?
That's a good question. Hal or Spencer, do you guys know what the current use is?
It's ag land. So
do we lease it back to the current user, or what happens to it?
As we've been doing some of the other properties, we've been doing lease backs as much as possible. This one, where it's a total sale, we'll have to work with Paul and the real estate group to figure out a plan to maintain it going forward.
Okay.
And I would mention we're overbuying a little bit of right away here because the seller wanted to sell the whole thing. So eventually we'll probably sell some of this off and cut down to a smaller piece as well. So,
But that kind of leads me to my second question is it premature to go through some kind of stationary planning exercise with the local jurisdiction? I mean, do we know enough about what we would need for a station location? Because especially where it's right off the freeway, I imagine Willard would want to, eventually evolve some of that. And it'd be nice to sort of have them evolve it in a way that would be supportive of a future location.
yeah, go ahead, Paul. I'll let you talk to that.
Oh, sure. I think the amount of planning that we've done so far is probably appropriate at this time. There might become a time in the future where we do a little bit more in-depth station area planning. I don't see that right now might not be the best time to go into the level of detail that we do on like our existing stations. But there will probably come a time where that would be appropriate.
Any other questions from the board? Not seeing any. With that, then, should I go to you, Jill, or Jill? Excuse me, Beth. Sorry, it's a slip from my city council days. Beth, do you want to make a motion on this resolution?
I would be happy to. And by the way, Jill is a compliment, so thank you. I remember her well, and she did a fantastic job.
Yeah,
I would like to make a motion that we approve R 2020-12-07, the resolution authorizing the purchase of real property for Box Elder County right-of-way with the Dutch A LLC parcel 1070 T.
Let's see.
I will second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion on the resolution by Beth, seconded by Jeff. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Trustee Aitchison,
Aye.
Chair Christensen,
Aye.
vote unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Hal. With that, we'll move forward to contracts, disbursements, and grant. The first item up is a pre-procurement, and with that, we'll welcome Todd Mills. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and trustees. This morning, I just have one procurement that's ready to go out for bid. It's a procurement to purchase the signal and track materials necessary to install the front runner double tracking at the Vineyard Front Runner Station. This project is being constructed per an interagency cooperative agreement with UDOT, and UTA is responsible to pay for the materials needed for construction. UDOT performed an RFP for the Phase 1 design and Phase 2 construction of this project, and Stacy Whitbeck was selected as the vendor. Construction will take place in 2021. However, some items are long lead time items, and an order needs to be placed now in order to avoid a delay in the project. This will be a one-time purchase, and the materials will be procured through the contractor, Stacy Whitbeck, who performed a competitive bid for the materials as part of their bid. I have Mary DeLoretto on as well to answer any specific questions you might have.
Mary, I presume that the design is enough that we know actually what materials we need or that we're asking the responders to bid towards.
Yeah, the design is complete, and we know that these are the materials that we need. And as Todd mentioned, they're long lead items, so this allows us to get the procurement started for those items. We plan to come back next week with the contract for approval, but we need to do the pre-procurement for a week, I believe. And then, then we're ready to buy the materials. We know exactly what we need for this.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Mary, I just had a quick question. When do you anticipate completion of this? I know you anticipate starting towards in the middle of next year. I'm just curious as to what a completion timeline is.
The contract will be for construction will be through UDOT. They expect to have a notice to proceed in, I believe it's early February or sometime in February. The goal is to have it completed by August. we'll see if hopefully that happens. I know there's some issues right now with the wetland permit, but we think UDOT's working those out with the Army Corps of Engineers. So hopefully the goal is for August timeline to open that station.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mary or Todd?
I just want to make a comment in regards to UDOT. Having been part of that discussion, and Mary can back me up on this, they're really trying to be responsive and keeping us up to date with the process. As Mary indicated, there are a few things they need to get resolved, and they're working very actively to get that done. So I just wanted to do a shout out to UDOT. So thank you.
Yeah, they've been a great partner on this. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you, and we'll hope that bids are competitive and aggressive. So.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Next up is service and fare approvals, and the first item up is a fare approval past purchase and distribution agreement with Visit Salt Lake. Monica, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, thank you. I'm also joined this morning by Andreas Coleman, and we have several contracts to go through. The first one is a contract with Visit Salt Lake. It's for this upcoming ski season, 2020-2021. And this contract allows them to distribute electronic passes to Weber County hotels that they will then sell to their guests. And it's valid for 1 day in the amount of $8. It is a 20% discount for a trip up and down the canyon, and we estimate the contract revenue to be around $1,500 to $2,500 this season. So with your approval, we will move forward and execute this contract.
Any questions on this particular one? Seems pretty straightforward. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and make that motion to approve the fare agreement as presented in meeting materials.
Second.
I have a motion by Jeff, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Point of order, Chair. I just want to clarify that contract is with Visit Ogden, not Visit Salt Lake.
Oh, did I say Salt Lake? I apologize.
Thank you.
Correct. At least Jeff's motion was correct because he referenced the materials. So I guess selfishly I want everybody to visit Salt Lake, but they should visit Ogden too. So thanks for that.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Chair.
Yeah. Our next item is also a sponsored fare agreement with Lagoon Station Park for shuttle bus service, amendment number 2 with Farmington City. Monica?
Yes, so this is a second renewal option that they have exercised, and revenue from this contract is $74,090 and is based on 25% of the operating costs. If you don't have any questions, then we'll seek your approval and move forward.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the sponsored fare agreement with Lagoon and the Station Park shuttle bus service, amendment 2 with Farmington City.
I will second that motion.
I have a motion by Beth, seconded by Jeff. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. That brings us to item number C, which is a sponsored fare agreement for trolley bus service, amendment number 1 with Layton City. Monica?
Yes, thank you. So this revenue is going to be $162,760. It is also based on 25% of the operating costs, and we seek your approval for this one as well.
Any questions? If not, I entertain a motion.
I will make that motion for the sponsored fare agreement between Trolley Bus Service Amendment 1, Layton City.
Second.
I have a motion by Jeff, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. That brings us to item D on our agenda, which is a sponsored fare agreement for trolley bus service, amendment 1 with Ogden City. Monica?
Yes, so this will be the first renewal option that they have exercised, and the revenue will be $72,906. It's also based on 25% of the operating costs. With your approval, we will move forward and execute this contract.
The one question I had, if I could, how successful has that trolley bus? And obviously, their downtown probably has struggled a little bit, similar to Salt Lake, but was it being successful beforehand? I imagine they are because they're renewing it, but I don't know if Andreas, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, good morning, trustee, and good morning, chair. The Ogden trolley was successful. Our first year was 2019, pre-COVID. Our average daily ridership was in the 200 to 250 passenger range, which is quite well and surprising for such a new route. An interesting fact is ridership was higher on Saturdays than on weekdays, indicating that visitors coming into Ogden, potentially using FrontRunner, were riding the trolley to get around downtown Ogden. During 2020, with the COVID-19, ridership on this route has dropped significantly less than our average ridership drop on all our routes. So it continues to perform successfully given the conditions we're under.
Great, thank you. Beth, did you have a question though?
No, I did want to make a comment that that this was the newest trolley in the area. But I think Andreas covered it really well. I know that the mayor of Ogden, so Mayor Caldwell, and the city are really happy with how this service has started out. So even with COVID, I think that it is still, it's obviously very, very popular, and they are hoping to continue that. So that was my comment.
And any
And
other?
with that,
I just confirming if there are any other questions. And seeing that, I'll come back to you, Beth. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the sponsored fare agreement, the trolley bus service amendment 1 with Ogden City.
I will second that motion.
I have a motion from Beth, seconded by Jeff. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. We'll go next to a fare agreement with the Hive Pass purchase and administration agreement, number 1 with Salt Lake City Corporation. Monica?
Yes, thank you. So this is the final contract I'll go over. It is with Salt Lake City for the Hive Pass. So this is an amendment to their existing contract, and it's for the section that references the price of the pass. The price of the pass has gone from $83.75 to $85 with our changes in our fare policy. So it is necessary to adjust the price of the pass in the contract, and that is what this amendment does. It will result in $1 per pass additional that we'll bill to Salt Lake. Our contribution as part of that discount will be 25 cents, and then the resident will not be impacted. They will not have a price increase. So with your approval, we will execute this amendment.
Monica, if you were comparing I have no opposition, by the way, but if you were comparing the Hive Pass for a low-income rider compared to the pilot that we just approved last week, or if they're receiving service, it seems like you wouldn't send them down this avenue, would you?
So the discounts would be equal on that pass. The difference with this and our pilot is we'll be using the FarePay card. So it won't be a monthly pass that they're purchasing.
Okay.
So kind of depending on their need, this may or may not be a better option, but I don't know that we would send them down this path.
Okay. Okay. Other questions, however, for Monica? Okay. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on this agreement.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion to approve the Hive Pass Purchase and Administration Agreement Amendment 1 with Salt Lake City Corporation.
Second.
I have a motion by Jeff, seconded by Beth, to approve the agreement. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. thank you, Monica. Thanks for you and your staff for your work on it. So, we will then move on to some discussion items, and our first item up is our 2021 final budget, and we've had a period of public comment, and there may probably some minor modifications to it. And with that, we'll go to our CFO, Bill Green. Welcome, and good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Chair Christensen, Trustees Holbrook and Acerson. I'm here today to talk about some of the proposed changes we have to the tentative budget that we've been working on for the last couple of months. The net change, next slide, please. We've got some minor changes to the operating budget. There are no changes to the capital budget, and then I've got some technical changes to the what we're calling the financial plan, that is the debt service and lease payments. The operating budget net change is relatively minor. It's about $16,000. We're requesting 1.3 FTEs. No change to capital, as I said, and $2.3 million to the lease payments. Let me get into a little bit of detail on these three operating requests and also on the financial plan changes. So the first change is to repurpose 1 FTE from operations. We're moving an administrative position from the paratransit group over to the people office to focus a resource on career development for UTA's frontline employees. This position will be deployed to provide one-on-one coaching with employees who are looking to develop skills for advancement. The emphasis will be on preparing the frontline employees to transition into supervisory roles. This work complements our Leadership Pathways program and is key to ensuring the frontline supervisors have the skills necessary for a successful transition. The second request is an increase of about 0.3 of an FTE and about $16,000. We're taking a records clerk in the records management group and turning that into requesting a full F-time FTE. The additional hours will be used to organize and digitize key records in the TOD area. Also, we have a number of other large projects similar to this one in other parts of the organization. These projects are part of the transition from paper to virtual media and the new Laserfish system. And finally, we've got a $0 impact, 1 FTE request in the newly created enterprise strategy group. And we were able to accommodate that change within existing revenues. That new position will give administrative support to that group. On the financial plan changes, these are some adjustments necessary. These adjustments were necessary through the refunding. We have some final numbers now, the debt service, and some leases for the MCI buses. I would say primarily they're the buses. The lease is about $2 million of the 2.3, and the rest is associated with the bond refinancing. This is a one-time shot. It doesn't have an ongoing impact through the 5 years of the plan. And so that is my summary for those. Next slide, please. This is a display just showing you in Exhibit A, which we'll be bringing to you next week for your consideration for adopting the budget. I just want to give you a sneak peek of what the impacts of that Exhibit A would be. And you can see the in and out action there of the paratransit, $87,000 moving from the paratransit group down to operation support, and then $16,000 associated with the third of an FTE. And then down below the line in the lease and debt service, you see the $2.3 million. So at the very bottom, you see the net of $16,000. Next slide, please. Another look. This is basically what you see here is the capital. And as I said, no change to capital. So, again, we've got a very strong state of good repair program scheduled for next year. Next slide, please. This is, again, one more look at the changes in the operating program. You can see the net is $16,000, just one more way to display it. Next slide, please. This is the FTE impact. So you can see again, the in and out action, moving the 1 FTE from operations. You can see we're requesting 1 FTE in enterprise strategy, and then the net of adding the 1 FTE from operations and adding the 0.3 of an FTE to create that permanent position in the people office. So a net increase to the overall FTE count of 1.3. Next slide, please. Again, the tentative capital budget remains the same. Just another view of those kind of the major projects that we're proposing to accomplish next biennium or next year, excuse me. And you've seen this display before. Next slide, please. All right, so we started back in November. Just to update you, we've had a virtual public hearing. Excuse me, the tentative was adopted in November the 4th. Virtual public hearing on the 10th. We had a public hearing on the 11th. We went before the local advisory council on the 18th and got their input. And we're here today discussing it. As I said, we will, public comments going to close on the 11th. I don't believe we received any, as of last Friday, I don't believe we received any comments on the budget section. I could be corrected on that though, but if not, very few comments for sure. And then we will be coming to you on December 16th to approve the final budget for you, to ask you to approve it. And then by December 31st, we will publish, incorporating all these changes into the budget, the final budget, and distribute the book. Next slide, please. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions from the board on these changes to the tentative budget? Okay. I think as Bill pointed out, we'll hold action till next week, potentially, and this gives time for anybody to review the final changes to it. So, Bill, anything else?
No, I just want to thank everyone for all their hard work on the budget.
Well, thank you. And it's always been fun to be hired right in the middle of the budget process, right?
Yeah, well, I walked in on a great team, so I'm pretty lucky that way.
Oh, good. Well, we're glad to have you here. So,
thank you.
Thank you for that update, and we'll look forward to next week. Our next item up is the UTA Microtransit Planning Project Report, and this is just a little bit different. I'll let them describe. And historically, we've had on the pilot project, but this is more of a planning project about how we would use microtransit. So it is a very kind of different thing, but same subject. With that, we would welcome Jaron Robertson, Eric Callison, Ryan Taylor, and Libby Osguera. Sorry, Libby. You're going to have to correct my pronunciation. So, Jaron, are you leading this discussion?
Ryan's going to kick this off.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ryan?
Great. Thank you very much. Could we go to the next slide, please? Just wanted to do a quick introduction of our project team. So the leads from UTA were, as you noted, Jaron from Innovative Mobility, Eric Callison from Service Planning, myself from Coordinated Mobility, and we had contracted with VIA Mobility. Now that's a different side of VIA. We contract with VIA to operate our current microtransit pilot. They also have a planning side that does planning and simulation, and so we had contracted with them to help us with this project. But it was all made possible, quite frankly, because of the partnership and funding support from the Utah Developmental Disabilities Council. We've been working with them for a number of years in our local coordinating councils that works with people with disabilities and seniors and their transportation. And we were approached by them with a funding opportunity. And as we discussed this, it really made a lot of sense to move microtransit forward and to look at what the expansion could look like because it can provide so much support for these people. And so I wanted to give Libby Osguera, the executive director of UDDC, a few minutes to talk about their office, what they do, and a little bit about their thoughts on this project. So Libby, I'm going to turn a few minutes over to you.
Thank you, Ryan, and good morning to you, Chair and Board of Trustees. I'm very happy to be here today. Again, I'm Libby Osguera, and I'm the Executive Director of the Utah Developmental Disabilities Council. So we are one of 55 councils throughout the United States and its territories, and we represent people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And while a disability is a very unique experience for each person, Some diagnoses within our community are autism spectrum disorder, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, just to name a few. So you're a little bit more familiar with the population that we serve. So our governor-appointed board brings together lived experience and knowledge of local challenges and strengths from across the state, and we attempt to solve problems and remove barriers, but mostly to make sure that the voice of people with developmental disabilities and their families are included in local and state decisions. There's a number of ways we do this work, and some examples are by creating and informing public policies and finding opportunities to remove barriers so that Utahns living with disabilities have more opportunities. And then we fund small grants, or sometimes they're larger. But anyway, to support innovative ideas that promote inclusion of people with disabilities in our community, very much like what you're going to hear about today. So when we approached this conversation about this project, we were in search of a solution that would remove some of the difficulties that many people with disabilities face when it comes to becoming employed and maintaining a job. And this barrier has really been identified as transportation. Many people with disabilities rely on others for their transportation needs, whether it's their friends or their families, paid support staff, or public transportation. When transportation is difficult for people to find, you could see how that really easily interfere with somebody's independence, especially when it comes to getting a ride to work. So working with Ryan and Jaron and their team has really been a dream come true, to be honest. They really went to great lengths to make sure that the needs of our community were considered and that people with disabilities were acknowledged when they started to embark on creating this transportation modality that would really be accessible to people with physical and intellectual impairments, but also affordable, because a lot of people in our community are much more likely to live in low-income households. And the effort that the UTA team and their partners went to find the right process and the people involved was much appreciated and highly effective, as you'll see today. The outcome of their thoughtful approach resulted in this wonderful simulation and planning study. And I'm excited for them to tell you more about that today. I'm really pleased with our partnership at UTA, and I'm excited at the possibilities that are before us. Obviously, it opens a door for much more independence and community integration for people with disabilities, as far as, you know, getting to work and keeping your job, but so much more beyond that. And that's all I have to say. I've just been really pleased with this whole experience and look forward to continuing our relationship in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Could we go to the next? So we just wanted to let you know that we're trying to make all of these planning efforts integrated to each other. You're familiar with the 5-year service plan. We have this microtransit study. We're also completed a paratransit study with VIA to look at some potential technology options that could help that service. In addition to my department doing a comprehensive transportation plan for seniors and people with disabilities. And so we're all working together on these to make sure that these efforts are all integrated, since they serve many of the same people. Next slide. And, you know, just to reiterate what Libby said, and she said that so eloquently, that microtransit has the potential to increase the mobility and freedom of seniors and people with disabilities, unlike any other service that UTA has ever put out on the street. And so it's really encouraging and exciting to see the potential of that and the freedom that it can bring. You know, highlighting also what microtransit can do is it really expands our service coverage to literally thousands of people that wouldn't have access to any sort of transportation, public transportation options, if that were not available. It also allows us to right-size the service in the right areas. Just as we've seen with COVID, we can reduce the fleet, expand the fleet, and it's very nimble to be able to do that. Also, in addition, even though this wasn't part of the study, it makes us consider what options we could use for night service and weekend service, where fixed route bus service would be inefficient or ineffective. And so it really, microtransit opens up a lot of doors of opportunity for the future. And we're so excited about that. Next slide. So jumping into the study, one thing that we wanted to ensure is that as we're moving forward and considering expansion of microtransit, we wanted to make sure that it's accessible for everyone. And so part of this planning process with VIA was an analysis of the entire process, from the mobile app itself and how that functions and how people interact with it, to the booking process, to the pickup, to the vehicles, the customer support. And also really important was the integration, how we integrate these two services with our existing paratransit and how those customers can be able to make a transfer between microtransit and paratransit, and making sure that we have things in place to support those things. So we wanted to make sure and ensure that it's accessible for everyone because it can lift the tide so well. Next slide, please. So for the scope of the project, it really lays out guidance on future expansion. We wanted to lay down a roadmap to help inform UTA about the potential and where microtransit could expand. We identified the goals and objectives of that, and specifically we identified recommended locations and zones across the entire transit service district where microtransit would potentially make a good fit. We then took those zones and simulated each one of those to look at the ridership and then give us some estimates on cost of what it would take to actually implement each one of those zones and how we may prioritize those. And then again, like I said, we had those recommendations to ensure accessibility with that. So that's the big scope of the project. From this point, we want to turn the time over to Eric Callison to talk about some of the planning fundamentals that went into it. Eric?
Thanks, Ryan. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about our approach on how to identify which microtransit areas to model kind of for this next phase of implementation. We worked with VIA, as Ryan mentioned, and also with Foursquare ITP on this analysis and broke it down basically into three main parts. The first is the transit potential, basically meaning how many people could we serve in an area, and that's mainly based on the population and employment density, as well as the transit need, which is low income, elderly, populations with disabilities, other vulnerable groups that could benefit the most from these kinds of services. Whether or not there is a large concentration of people in an area, we might have an area that's not as densely populated, but still has a transit need. So we wanted to break those two out as two separate components of the analysis. And then also, what is the existing transit service level in an area? So if there already is high quality transit in an area, microtransit may not be as great of an expansion of coverage as it is in an area where there isn't any existing transit service. If we could go to the next slide, please. So based on those three criteria, this is UTA's entire service area. We basically did a large buffer around the whole area and looked for areas with a high population or employment density, areas with a high transit need, and areas where there's not a lot of existing transit. And that's shown on this map as the green, yellow, and red, as you can see on the color scale. Tends to be concentrated in a few areas, kind of the west side of Weber and Davis counties. You can see the south end of Salt Lake County, as well as the northern part of Utah County, are some of the areas that really kind of jumped out as areas where we could expand coverage to a large number of individuals where there's not already a robust transit network in all of these locations. And then if we go to the next slide, we can look at, from that analysis, we broke out 19 additional areas that we could model and go into a little bit more detail on. That doesn't necessarily mean that we would never run microtransit in other areas besides this. This is just kind of the next step. These are the next areas that jump out as areas that are particularly conducive to a microtransit implementation, good places for us to go next. So going from kind of the north end of our system to the south, you see we started in Brigham City North Ogden, West Weber County, as well as Northwest Davis County and then South Davis County. And then the next slide has areas in Salt Lake County and Utah County. We have the west side of Salt Lake City, which is an area that's we're working on with Salt Lake City as part of their transit master plan. You can also see Tooele Valley identified as a microtransit area. Several areas in the south end of Salt Lake County, as well as the north end of Utah County, Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, Linden, Vineyard, West Provo, and then in South Utah County, Springville and Spanish Fork, and then the communities of Salem, Payson, and Santaquin. And so these were the areas that we took forward with a more detailed analysis and modeling with the VIA team so that we could get some more information on how to proceed with the microtransit implementation going forward. I'll pause for just a second if anybody has any questions about that approach, and if not, I'll turn the time over to Jaron.
Eric, what's the thought? You know, if somebody's going from one zone to the other, would they just transfer to something else in our system? Would that VIA take them beyond the zones that you've identified? How would that continuity of transportation take place?
That's something that we haven't completely fleshed out, but we do have a couple of theories. Either we would ask people to transfer to the fixed route system, either to tracks, front runner, or bus, to go between the areas. And so you would kind of go from one area to the connecting service to the other area. Or we might be able to have transfer points from microtransit to microtransit on the boundary of some of these areas. It kind of depends on what the transportation needs are. And if there's a strong travel market from one zone to another, there's no reason we couldn't just say this is all part of the same zone. That's one of the nice things about microtransit, is that it is very nimble that way, that we would be able to adjust the boundaries of microtransit areas if we did have strong travel markets between them.
And Eric, sorry, can I interject and just add one more point? When we looked at the current microtransit pilot being such a large area, we did initially try to determine if it made sense to make it several small zones rather than one large zone. And it actually became more efficient to become one larger zone because it didn't restrict the movement of vehicles. So I think Eric's absolutely correct on we'd want to do further evaluation, but as we have also heard, the large zone can be more efficient as well. So we have to consider all those factors.
Beth, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to make sure I understand this, because to me, I love how this kind of appears to be. And when you talked about some of the demographics that you're wanting to really be included in this pilot, I thought the age one was really interesting. Traditionally, I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly, when you say the age category, these are people that varying places of where they live, etc., but they just don't have access to a vehicle because of their age, in essence. And I just wondered how that integrated, and wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. So maybe you could just kind of expand on that just a little bit.
That was one of the factors that we took into account in the transit need portion of the analysis, specifically seniors, people whose mobility or ability to drive is limited because they're elderly. But we've also found in the existing pilot that some people who are too young to drive have also been able to use the service, that typically have relied on parents or friends for rides, have been able to use the microtransit service to move independently as well. So that's kind of there's definitely some synergies or some unexpected benefits that come up when you provide the service this universally, that it can really provide access to markets that didn't have that don't have the ability to drive for any number of reasons. So
yeah, I thank you. I really think that this could hopefully, if I'm understanding all of this could really be kind of a game changer for those people, in addition to obviously being able to serve our disability communities and all of those other elements. So thank you. I'm excited to see how this goes.
Eric, you may have just made a bunch of parents in the southwest part of the county happy when they realize they now get a reduced youth fare pass, and then they just tell their kids they're on their own to get around to things. They don't have to shuttle them anymore. So I love the idea.
I am in full support of that idea. So.
Yeah. Sorry. We'll let you continue on. Thank you, though.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Jaron to continue the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And trustees, I just want to again thank all of our partners who supported this project. We've been working on this for the past over a year now. And as you can see, it's a really exciting conclusion to this project. And so just if you'll advance to the next slide, please. I want to just quickly highlight too, this is also the same process that we utilized when we started planning for the current South Salt Lake County microtransit pilot. So we were familiar with this process. We had already gone through it. We learned a lot from it, and we were able to just expand on a much larger scale, obviously. I would like to highlight a couple of themes. What we essentially get as a result for each simulated area, a 2-page summary about the key zone statistics and the characteristics of each trip. And what we're going to show you now is just an example of our South Davis County zone that came through. I do want to quickly highlight too, as we've been working on this over the past year, we did use pre-COVID data as we ran the simulation. So if we were to continue to advance any future microtransit service area based upon this report, obviously we would go back through and relook at current data, ridership, and other characteristics to make sure we would stand up and be prepared to right-size the service for today's demand and ridership. Also, I guess I just want to highlight, as you saw what Eric just presented with the 19 service areas, obviously nothing is set in stone. We have great partners with VIA who have great flexibility, and we've been able to make adjustments as necessary. So as we continue to work through planning efforts, work with leadership, determine service needs and requirements, and our stakeholder needs, we have a lot of flexibility to go in and make final decisions if we were really moving forward with launching another zone. So with this, talking about the South Davis County zone, what you see here is a zone-by-zone simulation as mentioned. So what we get out of this are the key zone statistics. So you see the zone size, and you see information regarding population, density, and employment. We also look at zone design rationale, so why we evaluated the zone, our potential for fixed route replacement, improved connections to transit and other destinations, and really identification of major trip generators. We also kind of established zone or service quality parameters, which again is all configurable. So we established like a corner-to-corner service, a walking distance, an average wait time, and any kind of detours that are allowed for the vehicles. And again, maybe establish some sort of service hours and days as far as service goes, so we can really simulate how ridership patterns will behave and what we can anticipate as part of the service. And then we also going to look at the transit demand drivers, as Eric talked about before. If you'll move to the next slide, please. And so what we really get as a result is a zone-by-zone simulation and overview. And so we get estimated ridership, we can put an estimated fleet size, vehicle hours, and vehicle utilization, all with a low, medium, and high ridership scenario. And so with that, we can then as an agency start estimating costs and really look at setting goals and metrics for what we expect out of service. And again, it's the exact same process we used when we launched the South Salt Lake County pilot. Again, you did see the map of what a proposed service area would look like in the other slide, and this one just kind of highlights density based upon a heat map that we see as well for usage and those trip generators. And obviously in this service area, our front runner station is a really high projected location for a service. If you advance to the next slide, we're excited about this is we ended up with 19 different service areas. We asked the question, like, how do we really prioritize these service zones if we want to move forward as an agency? And so we really took to building this prioritization matrix, which really helps put together some key characteristics of what we would want in a service, so we could help really say what is important as an agency. And so some of the things we looked at is as you see there is we have the resources required, and that's annual vehicle hours. So this is kind of the opposite. The more resources required, the more a service would cost. So we kind of looked at lessening those resources as a priority, so that if it's a smaller cost, it might rank higher up in priority. We also looked at expansion of transit coverage, as Eric mentioned. We looked at potential for vehicle utilization. We looked at potential to replace existing service. We looked at the potential to replace paratransit service. And by that, we mean what are pickup and drop-off origins within the service area? And so we can move to a more convenient and less expensive service for our customers if they have access to a microtransit service. We also looked at the potential to service minority populations, as we've talked about, as part of all this. And so what you see here is the darker blue fields and are the higher priorities. And so you can kind of align those to see where some of the more higher potential service areas have fallen out based upon this criteria. I do always like to highlight our current pilot, which you can see just after the halfway point. We meet just about every single criteria as a very high priority, with the exception of maybe just the minority population that we serve in the south end of the valley. I do think it's important to highlight that this is what we put together as a team. It doesn't necessarily count for UTA strategic objectives, our stakeholder needs, or funding opportunities. So, as we look forward to future expansion, all those will have to be taken into consideration as we look forward to additional service areas. And then just one more slide, if you'll advance that. Really thinking about next steps. To be clear, I think trustees, you're aware of this, that there's a couple different operating models when we think about microtransit service. Currently, what we've partnered with VIA to do is a transit as a service solution, which we've hired them to come in and provide a full turnkey service where they come in and provide all service options, vehicles, operators, and so forth. There's also what we call software as a service solution, to which we could just lease the technology as an agency and work with either partners or work internally to provide operations, whether that be a microtransit service or potentially use some of these technologies on our other modes to really enhance on-demand transportation across our modes. So as we talk about that, we are a bit limited in our current contract with VIA to the scope of South Salt Lake County, potentially other services in Salt Lake County itself. So really, as an agency, we are planning and preparing to release an RFP to select a vendor to support the agency with both transportation as a service and software as a service solution over the next 5 years. And really, that is more designed to support our 5-year service plan and any other innovative or transportation solutions that we may strategically be planning for, again, over the next 5 years. And so as you look what's in that 5-year service plan, we have several innovative transit zones, as I think you're aware of. Also, we've been working with Salt Lake City as part of their trips transit program, as part of their master plan. So we want to prepare to support them as well. And so we do foresee a lot of future opportunities here, and what we're trying to be is very prepared to establish and launch programs as we determine as an agency. Regarding the RFP, we're moving forward quickly, and we do anticipate actually that coming through pre-procurement the next board meeting. And just in conclusion here, we really want to ensure that these technologies support UTA as a whole, and so we're trying to stay nimble and adjust as necessary. Ryan talked about the capability of potentially using these technologies for other modes and for other service opportunities such as late night and weekend service. So we've really established a good baseline and framework for us to move forward with the agency with these innovative on-demand services. And so we're really well prepared, and I would say far ahead of the game when it comes to this type of service. So I'll stop there, and I think any of us can answer any questions you have.
This is Carolyn.
Good morning, Carolyn.
Morning. I just want to not talk about this because Jaron did a great job, and Eric and Ryan a little bit about what we've done. This actually will go along with the 5-year plan, like Jaron said. So we have the 5-year plan out right now that would be adopted after the first of the year, in the early part of the year. Really, this time frame aligns with the next round as we start to build what is the next 2 years going to be like. So we won't have the answers on this for this 5-year plan you're going to adopt, but the 5-year plan laid the vision to be able to continue to look at these and work with our stakeholders, the communities, and really start that engagement process to make the determination about exactly where we will implement this. So it's a great synergistic process between operations and planning and all the various departments to continue to take a look at this. And it was a really good effort on part and the work that Ryan and Jaron and Eric have done on this to date, along with, I think VIA did a lot of the analysis. So just to keep in mind where we will be going. That won't be part of this 5-year plan you're about to adopt, but it's the basis for the next 5-year plan, because we would be implementing these services over the next, 2, 3, 4 years.
That's helpful. Thank you. Questions for our presenters? I will just say thank you, and Libby, thank you for joining our meeting today. I think having that integration of meeting all those needs, Jaron, as you've made reports and even the COVID reports on our pilot project, for the heartwarming satisfaction is how many have been accessible van requests, and you realize that probably opened a lot of access for a lot of parties, and even within their own community for some basic functions, and if we can replicate that elsewhere and better utilize our transit resources and meet needs more effectively, it's definitely worth this evaluation, and seems like this is a great starting point to do those evaluations as we go forward and following our adoption of our 5-year plan. So, any other questions, however?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a question, more of a comment. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating in the sense that my brother had a brain injury and is unable to drive. And one of his biggest challenges pre-COVID was getting to his doctor's appointments. And he lives in Riverton, and he has been using VIA, and he is over the moon thrilled with how this has really opened up his world. And that's just a microcosm of one individual. But when you look at this over our entire service area, the potential to have that integration and that added connectivity to people that have, physical or mental disabilities and challenges, and seniors as well. I think that this can really add a tremendous amount to our service. So I'm really excited to see this.
Thank you, Beth. Well, with that, we'll wait for more good news in the months and even years to come. But thank you for this effort and for this collaboration between UTA as well as our outside partners. So thank you. Carolyn, did you have anything before we draw to a conclusion? I think you mentioned you didn't have anything on your agency report.
Yeah, I don't have anything on my agency report, and thank you for allowing us to participate in the virtual rally with all the other public transit agencies, or a number of them, for additional funding for the transit industry during this pandemic, and how critical it is for the industry to have that and to keep our services running.
Thank you, and timely, and we appreciate your participation there as Congress weighs a number of issues going forward. So thank you. With that, we'll remind of our next meeting, which is December the 16th. We would just note a modification to our start time due to some scheduling and a number of issues that need to be addressed in this meeting. We're going to start next week's meeting at 8:30 a.m. So for those participating, just count on that earlier start time. Seeing no other actions, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion from Beth, seconded by Jeff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion stands, and we thank all the staff for all their efforts, and wish you a great day. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.